And Ryan Nobles, he's following the latest on the Russia investigation for us at the White House. Ryan, good morning.
Victor, good morning to you. And President Trump really seizing on this bombshell Washington Post report as a way to lay blame on President Obama for not doing enough to stop the Russian hack of the 2016 presidential election. This report details how President Obama was given this assessment by the CIA of Russia's attempts to intervene in the American election. And the report also details the response from one former administration official who felt that the administration sort of choked when it came to how they handled Russia. President Trump gave an interview to Fox News Channel, which will air tomorrow, and not surprisingly, he agrees with that assessment. Take a listen.
Well, I just heard today for the first time that Obama knew about Russia a long time before the election, and he did nothing about it. But nobody wants to talk about that. That the CIA gave him information on Russia a long time before they even, before the election. And I hardly see it. It's an amazing thing to me. In other words, the question is, if he had the information, why didn't he do something about it? He should have done something about it.
But former Obama administration officials are pushing back on that criticism. They say that the president did take action and that he really found out too late to have a significant impact on the election, that a lot of the damage had already been done. They specifically point to the fact that the president confronted Vladimir Putin at a meeting of the G20 summit back in September, right before the election. And it's also important to point out that Donald Trump himself has been very skeptical of Russia's involvement in the American election. He suggested at different times that maybe China was responsible, or maybe a man in his pajamas sitting in his basement could have been responsible for it. So it's just recently that the administration has come around to the thinking that Russia was involved. And of course, President Obama was also concerned that if he took too dramatic of action, that it may look like he was trying to help Hillary Clinton in the election, and that there were serious political ramifications for any decision that he made at that time. Victor?
All right, Ryan Nobles for us at the White House. Ryan, thank you.
I want to bring in CNN political analyst and columnist for the Washington Post, Josh Rogin, and Washington bureau chief of the New York Post, Gabby Morangiello. Thank you both for being with us. Josh, I want to start with you. And just to reiterate, according to this Post report, in early August, the CIA told President Obama that President Putin specifically directed election cyber hacking. We did have Jay Johnson, former Homeland Security Secretary, talk about that with the House Intel Committee this week, talking about why they didn't release that information. Let's listen together here.
One of the candidates, as you recall, was predicting that the election was going to be rigged in some way. And so we were concerned that by making the statement, we might, in and of itself, be challenging the integrity of the election process itself.
Is that explanation enough, Josh Rogin, or is there a point to what President Trump is saying that President Obama didn't do enough? Could things have been done differently?
I think things could have been done differently. Hindsight is 20/20, and it's easy to criticize the Obama administration at this point, but that doesn't mean they don't deserve some criticism. I personally interviewed Jay Johnson on Thursday and pressed him on that exact point. And basically what he's saying is that they let political considerations factor into how they responded to what's essentially a national security emergency, an attack on our democracy by a foreign power directed by a foreign leader. Now, looking back, that doesn't look so good, okay? But we are where we are. They did do some things. President Trump is not correct. They did do some things. They didn't do enough to deter the Russians. But if President Trump is going to criticize them for not doing enough, that begs the question of what's he going to do, okay? And he's had this sort of schizophrenic approach, right? Either it's a hoax or it's a real thing and we need to do something. And if his new approach is that it's a real thing and we need to do something, well, then the Trump administration has to lay out exactly what that is. And what that should be is a robust plan to punish Russia, push back on Russian aggression and Russian interference, and then come up with some way to deter these attacks in the future. And that's a big project, and I don't see any of that work actually really going on.
Okay, Gabby, let's listen to Representative Will Hurd here from Texas talking about just that, his concern over whether anything is being done to thwart future attacks from Russia.
An attack on the DNC is an attack on all of us, and this was a covert influence operation, and we should be making sure that we're talking about how do we do a counter covert influence. This is something that we've shown that we're not prepared for, and the Russians are going to do it again. They've been doing it for a couple of decades in Eastern Europe. They did it in our election last time, and we should expect to see them again in 2018.
Is there any evidence, Gabby, from the White House that they are going to take action in some way?
Well, look, I think Josh hit the nail on the head. I mean, President Trump has tried to have it both ways for the most part of his administration so far, in terms of, on one point, saying that the Russia narrative is a hoax and that Democrats are pursuing a witch hunt against him, but then on the other hand, admitting in his tweet yesterday that Russia did in fact meddle in the 2016 election. And I think Congressman Hurd makes an important point here, and I've heard a number of other Republican lawmakers, including Senator Rubio, make this point, that if it was Democrats who were targeted in 2016, it's likely to be Republicans who are targeted in 2018 or even 2020. And so for this administration to ignore that, I think is really detrimental, not just to the American public and to the integrity of our elections, but also to the party that President Trump supposedly represents. And so I really think that they do need to take this seriously, and I know that in this Washington Post report yesterday there was some information about a possible plan to input cyber weapons into Russia's infrastructure, something that had started under the Obama administration and could in fact be implemented by the Trump administration if they choose to do so. So I think that's a big question here, whether or not they will follow through on that and complete that that program.
Well, and looking forward, Josh, next month, the G20 in Hamburg, very good possibility that President Trump is going to come face-to-face with President Putin. How does the president approach Putin? And will there be, do you believe, any substantial conversations about this, about Syria, about Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the White House knows yet exactly if they're going to have a Trump-Putin meeting, and if so, what their strategy on that is going to be. They're sort of playing this day by day. I think that's pretty clear. You know, what you would expect in this type of situation is for an American leader to go to Putin and to say, okay, here's exactly what we're going to do if this continues, and here's exactly why you're not going to want to do this again to us in the next election. And that is not just about sort of cyber weapons. It's about a whole of government approach. It's about, diplomatic, political, military pressures that are organized in a deterrence framework that, raises the price of this kind of nonsense for an actor like Russia to the point where Putin wouldn't actually want to do it. Now, again, I don't think the White House is doing that, or at least I don't see any evidence of that at all. So if they have this meeting, what we're likely to see is a lot of what we saw the last time President Trump met senior Russian leaders. That was at the White House with Lavrov and Kislyak, and that was like a love fest. They just broed out for like 2 hours, okay? And then the president leaked a lot of top secret intelligence to the Russian leaders, and they didn't talk about this stuff at all. So if that's the mindset that they're in when the G20 comes up in Germany next month, that's a problem, all right? But we'll have to just wait and see if they change their tune and how many times between now and then.
All righty. Josh Rogan, Gabby Morangiello, so grateful to have you both here. Thank you.